Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm taking a short break from my validator node operators type series to bring about some discussion. There are some soft issues that arise on Discord from time to time, and it is usually, especially where staff members get involved, it's usually quite enlightening. And I like mature discussion and sharing of thoughts and looking at a problem from different angles. It was quite enjoyable, and so much so that I decided to do a video on it. So you must appreciate that I did like it. So I just wish to draw attention to the title of the series. It's called Plain Talk. And just to give you a little background, it is a bit of an abbreviation of a phrase used in the Caribbean, plain talk, bad manner. It means, if we convert that to US speak, it means to speak your mind. So, say what you have to say. I'm usually a very well-mannered person, so I couldn't, with good mind, represent it as a plain talk, bad manner, so I just left it as plain talk. Or if we want to read into that, that will be plain talk with good manner. Right? So the topic today is centralized decentralization. I will explain it for the uninitiated, but I think some can already see where I'm going with the discussion. Right, so I wish to make my goals up front. I wish to identify a possible gap, and I emphasize possible because maybe there is no gap. And if there is a perception, if others share that perception that, we are in a centralized, decentralized environment, perhaps the issue now becomes how can we correct that perception. Of course, with regards to the points 2 and 3, it's meant to spur intellectual discussion and to engage your discussion with others in a manner of respect. This is not meant to start riots on riot and to form angry mobs and spamming and all of these negative behaviors. So let us be mature in the representation of our thoughts. And finally, suggestions. I do represent some of the suggestions that came about in the discussion. I do digress that the final is mine, and it may not be technically viable, but you never know that maybe your suggestion is not perfect, but it can encourage someone else to twist the suggestion or to say, hey, that is so outlandish. What we really need to do is this, So sometimes outlandish or crazy suggestions can lead to a possible viable solution. So, make it within certain bounds, there's boundaries for everything. So, an introduction. When we hear the term blockchain, it's so much involved in it, but there's an expectation of decentralization. When we look at Bitcoin, one of the things was, one of the points under Bitcoin was, hey, it's a decentralized ledger. So it's quite good, and there's that expectation that, we have not only one server or a group of, key servers dealing with the network operation, but we have multiple nodes responsible for that network. So with that, going on to point 2, there is an onus on rewarding high availability because you want your nodes on. more nodes leads to more decentralization, and those nodes stay up there. You have that reliability aspect to it. So I just leave that as a bullet point, because I think if we expand on every single thing that I'm discussing, this could be an hour-long presentation. So I'm trying to keep it as short as I can, and curb my own enthusiasm to discuss it more. So with that said, we have cloud computing and these data centers and servers you can buy online, and it is attractive in many aspects, and I will discuss some of those attractive aspects later on. But it is something that is attractive to, especially using these services for hosting a node. As with that said, you find that the number of nodes, it's because of ease of deployment under the cloud computing environment, and especially with proof of stake. You don't need exorbitant amounts of CPU power or whatever the case may be. It leads to a number of validator increase. So if it's ease of entry, people, and I'm not getting into the minimum stake and all those kind of things. We're just looking at server architecture as one aspect here. You tend to get a number of validators increased, but because of and this is where the centralized decentralization comes in, the number of validators increase, but they are compartmentalized or all in one, maybe one server farm. It's a bit, it may be under one, I would say, one network or one umbrella. So as I will represent later on with some numbers, we will see exactly where all of the servers are. What is our distribution? And, decentralization doesn't necessarily mean geographic dispersion, but that has a geographic spread and different networks and all those kind of things leads to a little more resilience or less reliance on a particular provider. So I just end with the last point. The concern really comes about that if you put all your eggs in one basket, and that basket should have a major event, if you fall, you can damage all the eggs. And that's basically what it is. If you have all of your nodes on Google, or significant number of nodes on Google Cloud Hosting, for instance, and the Google Cloud should have a major event, then your network, you lose half your nodes, and with losing half your nodes, you lose the capacity that it provides. And I don't need to get into those specific details. And I do appreciate, and I will discuss it later, some of the other, exactly how Polkadot does this thing, and how do they protect against these type of issues. Okay, so let's just represent some of the the geographic distribution of the Polkadot servers. We would find that we don't really have that significant of a geographic distribution. What we have, and I won't even say North America, Canadians need to get more involved. We have the USA on the Western Hemisphere. There is an outlier someplace in South America, but it seems singular. We do have Western Europe, lots of dots, a lot of spread, I should say. And we do have some in Asia. Now, I did not represent the numbers, and it's probably not good for visualizing or representation of data. But even though there seems to be fewer dots in the USA, there are a lot of dots on top of each other, and the US does represent a significant number of nodes. So even though Europe, this one over here, looks quite like a lot, it's just because of it has a better spread. So again, leading to the same point. So when we look at the Polkadot validators, we can see, if we're looking at numbers, Google Cloud does have a significant, there are a lot of validators, a significant number of validators using Google Cloud. And if we add all the numbers, we get 56.6 using cloud providers. And, if we just look at 220 over 606, maybe about a third, a little above a third, using Google Cloud itself. So it seems that, our eggs are in the Google Cloud basket. If we do the same for Kusama, it's quite a similar representation. We do have the USA, North America on that side. We do have Western Europe. I do see an outlier here. It seems to be Iceland, and we have Asia. So it is quite similar in terms of its distribution between Kusama and Polkadot. And if we look at the cloud hosting numbers, it is a bit lower for Kusama, and I can beg an inference or a suggestion as to why. Through the 1,000 validator program, there may be some persons hosting on their personal machines or home servers and the like. It is quite possible. Whereas with Polkadot, we find more, and I don't, this may be a different discussion, but we may find more of those exchanges and those, what we call whales and all those kind of things. The guys with the money, and the guys with the money don't usually host at home. They will engage a Google Cloud provider or their dedicated providers for hosting. So, they take that route. They take the corporate route. So we beg the question, do we have a problem? And there are significant advantages to using a cloud provider or a data center versus hosting a server at home. And some of these advantages, or most of these advantages, lie with high availability. You are paying to keep that server up, and there are teams, there's staff, all dedicated to that goal of giving you what you paid for and making sure it's available at that 99 point, and then we go a whole set of nines, 0.999, whatever, uptime. So you do get that. You have teams dealing with that for a fairly reasonable price. You do get redundancy, and be that redundancy of power supplies on the machine itself, and electrical supplies, internet supplies, and the like. Your machine should be operating in a very environmentally suitable manner, it's a cold room or whatever the case may be, all conducive to good computing. You are offered scaling in that it becomes a matter of a slider to increase your capacity versus actually going to a store and buying some hardware and plugging it into your machine. So you do get that benefit using cloud computing over setting up at home. And of course, you have stable and dependent internet links. While I haven't noticed that either Kusama or Polkadot uses any exorbitant amounts of bandwidth, I do digress that, or I do take the point that home internet connections, the distribution between upload and download is not always the best. You may find that you may have a download of, let's say, 100 megs, and you're quite proud, and your upload is about 5 to 10 megabits, and it's you may be very good on the down and weak on the up, and part of running that validator node, it does have it does require some upload, and you can't adjust those settings, so not to get into that too much, but it is a point worth maybe a softer point or lower priority point in the whole grand scheme of things. So okay, we go to a major event, and or what happens if there's a major event. So if there's a major event, and let's say Google Cloud goes down, and most of those servers in the US, all those validator nodes should go kaput, we would have, well, there's an investment standpoint, so there will be some slashing going on, and your stake will be at jeopardy, unfortunately. But let's look at the network. The network it should still run on the active validators that are still up and running. This is a point that I'm not too sure about, but on the next era, and I don't know if there's any way to, via governance to speed things up, but you can select new active nodes, and in selecting, if your pool of nodes, you do have those that are not affected by this Google Cloud major event, you can bring them in and you can get your network back up to capacity and strength as you had it before. As well, Polkadot can also lean on Kusama and probably pull some of those guys over. So it is possible to strengthen the Polkadot system in such an occurrence. However, I must make this point. If your waiting validators are also on Google Cloud, you lose that your pool diminishes. So where you may have had reliance on your pool, that your waiting pool, that you may say, hey, I'm going in today to pull some I lost 300, 200 validators. I'm going to my pool, and your pool's also using Google Cloud, and that's cut by 50%. You're in a tough position, So this is what, in my mind, some of the considerations during a major event, and how should that ever occur? How can we guard against it? So what are some of our options? So we can encourage diversity by use of varying data centers. And what that means is that the process for becoming an active validator, you need some appreciation for that. Basically, there is a pool of validators that have met whatever requirements. We don't get into the staking requirements, but that is essentially what it is. But however you are onboarded, and you are now a candidate, and you can be elected to become an active node. And the encouraging diversity is a discussion that came about, that this election algorithm can give preference to persons that are hosting, in different areas, to give the overall network, perhaps I will just use a term, a score. We can establish a score for the network, and each validator can contribute a number to that score, and the number that you contribute, you will get a higher number if you're not on a cloud provider or something of that nature. Again, this is not pen to paper, but I think you can get a concept of what is being represented, that if you're not on a data center, there is some level of encouragement. Now, it's almost twofold, because you get all these lovely advantages with a data center, but now you're saying, let us not encourage it. Let us give somebody else a chance. So with the algorithm doesn't need to be single biased. There are also, we're looking at cloud hosting, like Google Cloud, but there may be other data centers that provide all of those nice stuff that we expect from that will lend towards high availability, but it's just not located on the Google Cloud platform or network. And I'm just using Google Cloud, but they are quite, as you may have noticed, there are others. So that is a possibility, and it takes really is a relook of the election algorithm, and tweaking those parameters. So I think that's within a realm of possibility. It may lead to some of these larger nodes. The guys with the money, they can go all over the world, and they start going to data centers and having their servers there, and those kind of things, and that may be exactly what we're looking for. So that is a possibility, and as you can see from the map there, if you go to even Canada, hosting in Canada, it's quite bare at this point in time, so there's a lot of room for spread at this point in time. So then we go on to residential hosting. That's encouraging, hosting at home, and there is we can get a large geographic spread quite easily, because there are quite a lot of individuals who come onto Discord and say, hey, that entry is it's quite difficult for us to get in, because of that stake, and I can't afford it, but I have I have good intention, and I do with that acknowledge that there is a program for that, the good intention, but I just raise it that there is a lot of community support, or there are people who are willing to host the validator at home. But I bring about the point of reliability, and having a stake that's too low, it trivializes the responsibility that you may have in hosting such a server, and really Polkadot, if you look at the marketing, it's supposed to be like enterprise grade, that guarantee that it's a solid network, and encouraging residential hosting on something that's enterprise grade maybe, or I wouldn't say maybe, I would say is undesirable. I'll be a little more deterministic. So a novel solution, and I know there are already challenges with regards to this novel solution. It's to develop maybe a validator group or a primary-secondary relationship. And I know that at present, two validators having the same session key is a problem. So it may lead to slashing. So it's not to encourage or to say that, there is already a solution, you just need to do this. It has its consequences in the live environment at present. And but perhaps, there may be some way to evolve and to get past that. And in this suggestion, we have one validator can be active while the other listens. So your validator, if there's a failure, let's say it's a primary secondary, the primary validator is up and he's on a cloud hosting. And if he fails, he goes to another secondary server that's not on the host or on any cloud computing. It's in a different region, or it's in the same region but not on the same network. So you do form something. There is redundancy. And that election. Now we get back to the election. The election process takes into consideration the pair. It doesn't take into consideration only, okay, you've met the minimum stake, all of those things stay on the primary. But okay, do you have a secondary? Yes. Is your secondary also on the same cloud? Then that doesn't make much of a difference. You get a nominal score. But if you have a secondary that's someplace remote, you look like a good candidate, because if you go down, I can fairly expect that your other node, your redundant node, is going to be up and running, and he can take your place at your capacity. So the network won't be too affected if your primary goes down, because that secondary will come back up. So there are some fringe benefits to this, and what are those fringe benefits? Well, I listed some, but there are some I'll just chat out. We can develop a system in which there are secondary validators as options, and a primary validator can nominate some of the commission to the secondary validator, and it doesn't need to be a significant amount. Just something that it's just a little incentive, and the secondary validator could have quite a lower point of entry into the system, so the everyday guy can become a secondary validator, and the primary validator will look at a lot of the same metrics as someone would look at for a primary validator. How often are you online? Have you, what's your general uptime? What are your specs on your system? Where you're located? Those sort of things could be metrics in terms of selecting a secondary validator. And the secondary validator, he could have some sort of like a nominal minimal stake, so minimum stake, so that we can get some of these community, we can get a little more community support. The rewards won't be as high, because if your commission is let's say 2% on the primary, and you take 10% of that, that's 10% of 2%, it's not necessarily all that grand, and perhaps it can be even less, right? So it's not about necessarily enriching a secondary validator, but allowing them to support for some nominal amount, something that may cover the cost of the risk. We may never need to use them, or we may definitely need to use them in the case of a major event. How often these things occur, I leave that to the statisticians, to put together those figures. So, we also, in doing this, we promote the little guy, and I think that's a big deal. And as the Polkadot community grows, we don't want to grow as seeing as favoring the whales, and those whales, some of them, not all, they just represent a collection of the little guy's money, So they took the stake or the currency or whatever the case may be from, let's say, 100,000 little guys buying one Kusama each, and now they have 100,000 Kusama, and they are now investing that in terms of setting up their own stake pool and the like, So. So it does give some incentive to the little guy to partake, and the quality measures in terms of uptime and those kind of things. It's quite measurable. So you have an opportunity to demonstrate that you can, and you may not attain the rewards you want, but it is always a risk for reward thing. You don't need to stake as much. You can receive some currency, some reward, just by being a backup and being a good backup. So it does lend towards that encouragement, and I'm not sure how the big guys are going to deal with this if it is if it contributes to selection in the active set. Of course, the big guys always want to be in that active set. So what are they going to do? Are they going to trickle down to the little guys and try to nominate some secondary validators? Or are they going to now invest in their own secondary validators in different countries and the like, So what happens in terms of the dynamic if this is proposed? How does that change the ecosystem, and is there any trickle down benefit, or does it just mean the big guys go to another big guy, or you have two locations, and one is the primary and one is the secondary, if you get where I'm coming from. So in one case, you put Google Cloud as your primary, and you go to China and you get a set of servers there, and you say that's a secondary, and then you do a swap. You put the primary as China and then the secondary as Google Cloud or something like that. So how do we guard against things like that, and how do we set up the election to consider all of these things? It is a big topic. It's a lot to discuss, but I just put that across there in this video, and that's about it. I don't think any voices were raised. I certainly didn't break any teacups, and my desk is still intact. So my monitor still looks pretty good. So I can say that the points were represented without heated or any severe emotion tantrums. So I'm quite proud, and I hope that others listening to this take example. And that's the most important thing, that we don't get wild up. We listen to a point, and we digest it. We eat our biscuit, and we drink our tea, and we ponder. We stare into the beyond, right? And perhaps after doing all of these customary actions, you may come up with a solution, and you may change the ecosystem in a dynamic that supports resilience. So I look forward to the views, and I do hope that we get there, and we support all members of the community. We keep our network uptime as high as possible, encourage network resilience, and continue to do such a good job in terms of discussing the big points. Okay, I end with that. It's about 8 minutes longer than I expected to talk, and probably about 20 minutes more than you wanted to hear. So goodbye.